Back. Okay. So I feel like sort of I'm reading the news or something. It's very weird. It's quite nerve-wracking actually. I much prefer. Anyway, don't complain. Stop complaining. There's no use complaining. I don't know why I'm doing it. I'm sorry. Let's continue. So, we're on page 202 now. As I've said, Kip is feeling really, really at home, really loved by these people, really accepted. Like they're not judging him based on his race. Like they really appreciate his work and his skill. And so about when I think so, it's May 1941 when this happens. It doesn't exactly say when he joins them, but 1940. So he's been with them for at least a year, working with them. Oh yeah, Singh had been with Suffolk's unit for a year. There you go, it says it in the book. So he's been with them for a year, so he's really thoroughly beaten the whole 10-week life expectancy thing, so that's nice. And he hears on page 202, or you learn that he narrates to Hannah in the tent about the death of Lord Suffolk, Miss Morden, and some trainees that have been working with them because there's a new type of bomb that had been dropped. Now, one of the many interesting things I think about this chapter is how you learn about how the bombs during World War II kept developing, kept changing, and the Germans would sort of invent new ways of the Nazis would invent new ways of blowing people up, and the sappers had to keep finding ways to sort of avoid being blown up, which makes sense. I had to try and avoid being blown up as well. So we learn on page 202 and all the way through until page 209 about the deaths of Lord Suffolk, and how for a time Corporal Singh basically takes Lord Suffolk's place as sort of a leader among sort of bomb detonation experts in England before basically, not necessarily freaking out, that's a too strong a word, but basically sort of wanting to get out of England and leaving and transferring himself to Italy, so he's no longer a part of that. And that's, of course, where he meets Hannah. So your next question number 5, was asking you to summarize exactly what happened, and it's quite detailed. So I'm not going to go through it in that much detail here. But one thing I wanted to point out to you was the fact that this is really where we see Kip beginning to really detach from his emotions. He has a lot of trouble connecting emotionally and with great depth to Hannah during their love affair. And we see that this is really the first example of it in the book. He, in order to sort of handle the death of his friends, he sort of pretends that they're still alive and really distances himself from it. Once he learns that they are dead, he realizes that they found another bomb, and he has to go and detonate and defuse that bomb. So he cannot afford to be emotional about what's just happened. So he goes and it's quite technical, the details that the book gives about how he diffuses this bomb, how he finds the trick in it. So or the joke, it's called, is the term that he uses, which is the sort of the trick that's in there to make somebody think that they'd successfully diffused it, and then it's not actually diffused. There's an interesting moment on top of page 205 where you actually hear the voice of Suffolk talking. So bottom of page 204 to 205, that start there, Lord Suffolk had said you could have a brilliant chess player at 17, even 13, who might beat a grandmaster, but you can never have a brilliant bridge player. Bridge depends on character. It doesn't really matter if you know what bridge is. It's a game that was very popular in England 100 years ago. I don't know that anyone really plays it anymore. But he's making a comparison between the chess player and the bridge player. And he's saying that playing bridge depends on your character, and he's making it a link between that and bomb disposal. You must consider the character of your enemy. Admittedly, though, I really feel like you have to consider the character of your enemy when you're playing chess as well, but I don't want to undermine his metaphor. But with bomb disposal, you have to think of the mind of your enemy and how they might be trying to trick you. People think a bomb is a mechanical object, a mechanical enemy, but you have to consider that somebody made it, which I thought was really interesting. And we're also getting the voice of Suffolk there. So suddenly we've got this I voice. Sometimes for my exam, I make them. So if you're wondering who that was, that's Lord Suffolk there. Further complicating the question of voice in this chapter. And then you get quite a detailed continuing narrative of exactly what he does. He got really, really lucky that he didn't get killed in this moment because he sort of pulled out the wires, which may have led to his death, but didn't. But he ends up working out exactly what's going on with this bomb. And on page 208, he realizes how much work Lord Suffolk had been doing, how much pressure he was under, and feels even more sort of admiration for that character, the character of Suffolk. And he realizes that he's going to have to take Suffolk's place. And he does that for a time. So working with some other experts, they work out exactly what's going on with this kind of bomb that killed Suffolk. They teach people how to deal with these new bombs, and then basically he quickly leaves Italy and returns to the anonymous mass of the army. He wanted to become a sapper. He wanted to work with Suffolk because he thought that he wanted to work with a sort of eccentric figure, and now suddenly he wants to sort of be anonymous again. So it talks about there how he nobody really knew the contribution that he had made to bomb disposal in England. He's one of the heroes of the story, but nobody really knows who he is. So on page 209, it talks about the self-sufficiency and privacy that are in Kip now in 1945 at the villa. It's not just caused by him being a sapper, it's also caused by him being an anonymous member of another race. So the whole chapter really centers around that idea that his experiences in life and his work, and then also the circumstances of his race, of not being European, essentially, of being a person of colour, being a person who's, being a person who lives in a colony, a British colony, and how that's affected the development of his character. Last but not least, we get page 213, and this is question 6, we get a discussion of Kip's brother, how they were different, how differently they reacted to the British presence in India, how his father was more of a sort of really an active resistance of that. And then the chapter ends back on that white horse with Miss Mordaunt again. So it's a chapter it's quite contained. It has a beginning and end in the same place, but jumps around in time. And it really gives us a clear and succinct, though very detailed, analysis of how Kip has come to be the person he is by the time we meet him with Hannah at the villa. So we've flashed back to learn how the circumstances of his race, his country, and his family, and his more recent experience during the war has combined to create a very private, very controlled, fearless and brave, but somebody who really isn't able to sort of connect with his own emotions in a way that's what we would consider to be healthy. Okay, 4C. Oh, 9 minutes. Nothing, not bad at all. That's the end of chapter 7. For your next lesson, I'll be talking to you about chapter 8. I hope you're all looking after yourselves. What do I want to say to you before I go? I hope you're trying to rest and relax and have fun. Stay on top of the news and make sure you know about it, but don't read too much about it. Don't freak yourselves out. And make sure you're being kind and looking after the people in your family and the people you're living with. This is a really difficult time, particularly for adults that are still having to go to work. This is a difficult time for anybody who has an older person in their lives who they're worried about. So make sure you're doing everything you can to help your parents and your families out. Clean up after yourselves. Absolutely, that should be the bare minimum. You should always be doing that. But if you can do something extra, like cook for your family or just do something nice and extra to help your parents out. Okay, I'll talk to you guys later.